right, you're watching Niaga AWANI with me, Nina Rosman, and with the title, as you can see in the screen, with Framing Sustainability Business as a Gift in the Future. And I'm going to bring you my guest and my old friend from Tata Consultancy Services. Welcome you, Wan Dazriq. Again, I'll say thank you very much. How are you?
No, good. Thank you. It's been a while. I'm here, so
it's glad to have you back here. Yeah. And probably talking about the festive holiday season, Christmas, going into New Year. Definitely, we want to take a look from the business perspective. It's like sustainability, it's like giving back to the planet and future generations. A perfect theme, we can say, for the holiday season. And focus on the business perspective. How can they give back to the planet and society while ensuring their own long-term growth?
Yeah, thanks, Nina. I think when you talk about sustainability, I think the mind frame that we should take on this is actually, yes, one is actually that giving back. I think historically we know, a lot of conversation around giving back is around the corporate social responsibility, CSR. But I think the mindset have to shift a bit, right? So it's no longer just about giving back, but the question is, how do you actually integrate businesses to do more good for the environment, to some extent society, and also being transparent about it, right? And maybe, the whole thing here also, businesses are prone, knowingly or unknowingly, to this notion of greenwashing, which is not something ideal, right? And that has a lot to do with education. So I think in answering your question short, I think we need to move away from, the traditional concept of giving back, but rather how do you do business for good? Like good to the stakeholders lah. It's not just about shareholder. Kalau dulu, I think we talk about doing business kind of profit maximizing je. But now it's really about that stakeholder interest. It's not just about money, but also the society involved. The staff, the employees, the values, and also to some extent also the environment. So yeah, I think it's really about how do you do business for good proactively and not just profit driven semata-mata lah.
Talking about not profit-driven, but we know that maintaining sustainability or integrating sustainability within the business framework is not easy, as it could cost a lot. What's your POV on this?
No, I think, again, right, I think the more progressive view about sustainability and ESG is really about long-term investment, right? You're right to say, short-term probably there will be more costs involved, right? In fact, if you want to promote sustainability practices, and I think one way that I could sort of share in Malaysia, so for example, TCS, we partner with Petronas, for example, and the idea behind that is actually we've created this sort of an incubator and accelerator to promote more, I guess, youth to do more impactful businesses or social enterprises. So what we are saying here is actually, look, it's not just about starting a business for profit making, but it should have an equal impact for society, benefits, and also environment, right? So I think at Malaysia, I think we have done, we call it Social Enterprise Education Lab, where we partner with Petronas to incubate these businesses. I think there's about 12 of them, dari cohort 1, 2, and 3 now. And it's amazing to see that a lot of these youth is not just focusing on profiteering, but also some of them are working on social challenges. We're talking about families with autism. We're talking about OKU, PWD. How do you get them into the inclusive business environment so that they can get employment with the big institutions, for example. And now we're seeing more into the orang kata agriculture. When we talk about securities, farmers punya livelihood. How do you make sure that there's enough when we talk about food? And the growing trend now we'll see is actually with regards to what we call the silver economy lah. The aging population, the aged care, right? So I think it may not be mainstream now, but you see a lot more, I guess, small businesses, small medium enterprises in Malaysia. I think we know the composition about 98%. The backbone of the economy is actually the micro, small, medium enterprises. These guys are the one who would actually be big in the future. And I believe, if the right trajectory is given, I think there will be the mainstream of the future businesses, not just in Malaysia, but hopefully in region and also globally juga lah.
And that is our hope and our dream moving forward. Hope to be better, bigger, and as we enter the new year with New Year's resolution for our businesses, aligning with the spirit of renewable during holiday season. How can integrating sustainability helps the businesses to stay relevant and competitive, especially for the backbone of that sector? We can say the SME that has been boosting our economy as main.
I think that's a good angle orang kata, right? I think in Malaysia we're no lack of festive season, right? So lepas Christmas period, then you come the Chinese New Year, then the Raya and stuff like that, right? So that gives an opportunity for, I guess, brand, first and foremost, to position. But more importantly now, I think with sustainability, I feel it becomes like a market differentiator. It's no longer just about brand proposition, but it's also an opportunity for businesses to say, look, what else that I'm doing for the environment ataupun society, so that I resonate with what the market want, and pretty much the young generations now are more inclined to actually spend ataupun consume with ethical products. And this is what we call the conscious consumerism lah. And I'm not talking about the B2B sangat. I'm talking about just people like you and I. Kalau kita nampak cookies and whatever it is, right? More and more now, I think survey shows, I think the younger population, I think about 80% of them are inclined to buy brands who have significant impact to either the community or environment. Now that's great, right? We're talking about kalau global brands like Patagonia, for example, right? So it's no longer just about orang kata ethical sourcing, but it's also everything that have to do with their supply chain. Ethical sourcing is one, reducing wastage is one. Community development also is another one, whereby they try to sort of do more training with the underprivileged, their staff, promote education and awareness and stuff like that lah. So if you are able to package that narrative, orang kata, and sell it into a pop-up shops, for example, in a way that is also educating the mass population in terms of, oh yeah, there's actually brands out there who is not just fast brand. Kalau kita talk about fashion, there's a lot on fast fashion, but it's also they're emphasizing on the ethical or the conscious sort of environment and society to it lah. And I think or rather in Tata Consulting punya lingo is the ESG lah, the environment, social and also governance is actually transparency lah. So I think it's a lot of opportunity in Malaysia, knowing that there's a lot of festive season. So then, the market differentiator is, yes, you put your brand out there, but how much more you are doing for the environment and society. And that's important.
And talking about younger generations, the youth are more inclined towards sustainable product and services. But in a workplace, in a work environment, we know that we are working with multi-generations, baby boomer, Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, and each of the generation have their own mindset and even approach. How can both of them work together, multi-generations, in terms of aligning their value, their method, and their approach to boost sustainability at workplace?
I think that's a great question, and you're talking about multi-generations of stakeholder, let's put it that way. And in the corporate world or private sector world, I think a lot still in Malaysia, the decision makers is actually those young in the in the 40s, 50s basically, right? As much as they are the decision makers, sometimes also, and I'm glad to see this, right? A lot of the C-suite, for example, C-suite, whether they are chief sustainability officer, chief marketing officer, even the CEO of themselves are re-educating themselves by engaging more with the younger generations. And likely, like it or not, because the younger generations, I guess younger population, especially in Malaysia now, and also regionally, are pretty much shaping the market demand now. And tak nak, you gotta
like it or not, you gotta
re-educate and adapt in terms of, how do we sort of ensure that we're doing sustainability in the right way lah. And I think the market can actually educate themselves when they see red flags, for example, like, oh yeah, actually this is greenwashing. You'll be surprised to see, especially in the TikTok generations and stuff like that, where, there's a false advertising around sustainability and consumer pick up on it quite fast, right?
Okay.
So at, my line of work itself in Tata Consulting Services also, we're trying to do more of an impact work alongside our, I guess, technology and delivery services lah. So what that means is actually, can we also leverage of using tech and digital, for example, to amplify more sustainable practices? And it could be many things. One is, could we evolve the way that companies or MNCs or GLCs of Malaysia to evolve their CSR practices to become more sustainable and amplifying more impact beyond the traditional way of doing CSR. And yang keduanya is actually, educating our partnering stakeholders and clients jugalah. Outside of corporate world also, we have started to look into exploring working with sort of state governments as well. When we talk about environment sustainability, when we talk about SDG and stuff like that, one that I could share also, we're exploring very much with Sabah. I think Sabah is a lot of potential there with regards to sustainable practices, community development dan sebagainya. But also we know Sabah is actually one of the lower income state in Malaysia. So the question is, can we do more, right? And we're not talking about capitalism semata-mata, but we're talking about how do you empower the community? How do you leverage technology, for example, to amplify more impact with regards to biodiversity, ecotourism, and they're also doing more stuff in the digital space so that the community in Sabah, dia punya jurang pemisahan antara the urban and non-urban tu can be closed, right? And that's something that I think there's a lot of opportunity that we're trying to do beyond the consumerism, but also it's about, trying to get state, in this case, to be strategic about considering environment when you talk about biodiversity dan sebagainya tadi, but also the society. How do you empower them? How do you elevate them from poverty? Can we use digital, for example, right? So that is something I'm excited about, especially in the Borneo part of Malaysia, and how we could sort of empower them jugalah, especially in this case Sabah, for example.
I like you take to a very large view, as we cannot only see the multi-generation within the company workplace, but also corporations or collaborative working together between cross state, cross agency, cross minister, and even we can see the private and the public. And from all of this cooperation, there's always challenges, and also along the way there's opportunities. And what some of the lessons that businesses can carry from 2024 to tone their strategies in 2025.
I think it's interesting, multi-layered, macam yang cakap tadi. So I think one of the, if you look at key trends, I think when you talk about sustainability, a lot are still focusing on environment front, which is great. I think in Malaysia, you'll see a lot of push around green technologies ataupun innovation. And I could, we all know this, right? So for example, Petronas, for example, have been investing a lot on renewables. Their target of net zero carbon, especially. So that's one. And you see another corporate Malaysia, like Malaysia Airlines, for example, have started to use SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuels, in order to, again, about carbon emission and environmental fronts. Nestle in Malaysia also is a great example. I think by 2025 also they are looking at using more recyclable packaging for the likes of their Milo dan sebagainya lah. So all of these are in tandem with the global trends. Now, what would be key, I feel, is aligning what our domestic local players are doing with the international standard.
Okay.
And you mentioned a bit earlier about the framework, and we know this, right? So the Security Commission, Bursa, for example, have come up with a ESG and SDG framework. Yes, that's a great start, but again, aligning it to the larger
scale of the group.
Yes, the larger scale, and we're not talking about small businesses, right? I mean, yes, small business we covered the MSMEs, about conscious consumerism. Education, that's great. But we're talking about corporate Malaysia, when we talk about sustainable aviation fuel, net zero carbon, environment front, it has to be synergistic with whatever happens in the international market, of which then it will make Malaysia also competitively in the sustainable space when we do, trading, for example. Later on, maybe we'll talk more about carbon trading, supply value chain, and things like that, right? So I think I'm cautiously optimistic for Malaysia. I think there's a lot of potential, but I think it has to be directed in a strategic way to be competitive. I'm not talking about trading per se, but I'm talking about the sustainability punya front lah.
Yeah. And talking about in the level of global context, and I might share some of data. This is from WEF. Maybe this is what happened in US. So one of advanced economies, we see 95% of G250 companies publish carbon targets, up from 80% in 2022, and 56% of G250 companies employ sustainability leaders compared to 45% in 2022, and 30% of G250 companies link sustainability to executive compensation. And there's a lot more numbers on that. Probably as a small and open economy as Malaysia, what can we learn from advanced and bigger economies, especially as they have more resources, more energy, more money to boost or promote sustainability, and what can we learn from other advanced countries and adapt within the local context?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think, and I'm covering multi-layered lah here. I think different approaches. So if you talk about the micro, small, medium enterprises segment, largely in the startup space, I think there's more fluid with regards to knowledge. For example, if startups coming to Malaysia, or Malaysian startups going abroad, for example, can have that best practices talent exchange, which is great. Yang kedua ni is with regards to the big players. When you talk about, the likes of our multinationals, for example, tadi, how do you either fit into the stats that you mentioned tadi, or conversely, there's a lot of opportunity in Malaysia that has room for these best practices. Sebagai contoh, I think in Malaysia, biodiversity is great, right? It could be underdeveloped comparatively to the Western countries. But, there's a lot of opportunities for us to do more here, leveraging on best practices, right? So what that fundamentally means is that and also because of all this globalization, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. Now, the only thing that I would encourage or probably look into is actually the policy side of things. How does government or government of Malaysia, for example, inculcate or provide more opportunities for these businesses, small, medium enterprises, or the big corporations, to do more of that. Now, hypothetically speaking, or illustratively speaking, is actually, how do you promote trade, for example? Vice versa, in the sense of kita go outside, outbound or inbound. When we approach foreign direct investments, for example, right? Can we also do that in the name of sustainability, right? We know for a fact, government are big in the sense of trying to push more data centers, AI and stuff like that. But we know also in Western countries, Google also are looking to do more with AI to promote sustainability, reducing use of energy, sebagai contoh. Can we also take that angle, for example, for the practitioners in Malaysia, right? And I think the only way to raise that profile, raise that awareness, is actually to certain government initiatives ataupun policies lah. We've seen a glimpse of this. For example, the use of EV, electric vehicles, for example. At one point in time, Malaysia was big, introducing incentives, taxes, and stuff like that, right? Keberkesanannya we won't discuss here, but I'm saying it's actually, can we use the same sort of approach and mentality, for example, to say, look, can we do more in Malaysia, outside in perspective, ataupun inside out? So that's something I feel we could do more of in Malaysia, knowing that what's happening in the market, not just locally, but also globally juga lah.
And talking about sustainability, giving back to the planet, during festive holiday season, many companies, or we can say business, will like blast everything. Accessories, there's more, we can say the more the merrier, but we know that sustainability is operate all year long. So what kind of downside risks or challenges for business and key leaders to maintain or operate sustainability all year long after this?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has a lot to do with education, Malik, right? Because you're right to say, and I think now if you go into Netflix, there's a documentary called buy now.
Buy now, correct.
Buy now shopping conspiracy, basically, right?
Yeah,
so
I watched that
Oh, you
documentary
watched?
actually, yeah.
Yeah, so the more you consume, basically, the more you're doing negative externalities, like whether it's packaging and stuff like that, right? The problem, again, lies within the education, lah. But the good news, if we're going on the trajectory of the youth now who are looking into ethical products, ethical consumption, conscious consumerism, sebagainya, they are savvy in terms of knowing what products that they need to choose. Now, if you're a corporate, and I'm extrapolating, right? So we know for a fact Malaysia next year, we're the chairmanship of ASEAN 2025, right? There'll be a lot on corporate gifting, maybe F&Bs, conferences, conventions, and stuff like that. Extrapolating from that, in 2027, SEA Games potentially will be in Malaysia also. Now you're talking about athlete merchandising, you know, again, all of those stuff, right? There's an opportunity here, again, to educate masses, right? To educate the rakyat also to say, look, what is an ethical product? And how you spend your money. So, for example, for every ringgit you're spending, how much more you're giving to the community, right? Is it about unemployment, reducing unemployment with PWD, struggling single mothers and sebagainya? That is something that I feel brands can do more. Now, if I'm a corporate, knowing what is it there, right? The low-hanging fruit for me to do that is actually through what we call perolehan ataupun social procurement. If I really know there's brands out there who are very ethical, I guess in the case of Malaysia, there's a lot of social enterprises yang focuses on, yes, doing business, but also impact kepada community ataupun environment. Can I start off with them first? Can I procure goods from them? Can I procure F&B services from them, whether it's seasonal, festive, conferences, conventions, and sebagainya lah. By way of doing that, I think you'll see more and more Malaysians or small medium enterprises in Malaysia are looking into sustainability. And they are maybe replicating, emulating, but they're targeting certain communities in Malaysia that they are feel resonate more about lah. So I think that's probably the easiest, lowest hanging fruit if you're a big company in corporate Malaysia. Again, perolehan is not just about, you know, who are the cheapest, but also what other value that I can probably provide by purchasing with these impactful brands or social enterprises and sebagainya. Yeah.
Probably you can share with us some of your probably successful case study. What can we learn from successful business that have turned sustainability into strength?
Yeah, so that's great, right? So I think TCS or Tata Consulting Services or Tata Group as an ethos, we're not very into profit making sangat. And to be honest with you, our model, right, 60% of the profits that we do, will go back to the community, whether it's through philanthropy. We invest a lot in healthcare. Back in India, with all our group profits, right? What that essentially means, our DNA tadi, is not just about profiteering, but also giving back to the community. And you probably know in India, I think there's a lot of populations that require support, or rather empowerment. I'm not talking support about grants and donations per se, but opportunities so that they can build their livelihoods. In TCS, when you talk about sustainable businesses, we have what we call the Digital Impact Square in Nashik. This has been running for about 8 years now, whereby we promote community to start their businesses, but solving social or environmental challenges dekat India. And this goes across, you know, clean water, for example. We call assistive technologies. If you're visually impaired, hearing impaired, sebagainya, how do you make sure that community also are able to be plugged into the normal lives of pretty much everyone by using this technology, right? So Digital Impact Square was created to essentially solve social environmental problem, but using a business model. So we talk about agri-tech, assistive tech, renewable and stuff like that. And that is what we believe it should be mainstream in the future. And like I said, I mentioned a bit about Social Enterprise Education Lab with Petronas. So that is a version that we partner with our client partner Petronas, basically, to do that in Malaysia. And it's a bit more localized lah. We talk about aging populations. We're talking about, you know, food securities and stuff like that. all in all, we believe also to amplify these solutions is using digital and technology. So that has been our bread and butter when we do IT delivery technology services. But it's not just about improving business processes and digital sebagainya, but can we take a lens also to amplify sustainability and impact to the communities? And that's what Digital Impact Square in Nashik, India is doing. That is what we'll continue to do with Petronas, with Social Enterprise Education Lab, and hopefully we can, create more impact to the livelihoods of the rakyat and the people here juga lah.
Correct, and the support, it's not only by giving, but also to create more opportunities.
Yes,
and
empowering communities.
empowering communities, correct. And we have 1 month left before going to, I think less than 1 month, a few more weeks going to 2025. New hope, new resolutions. And probably, Dazriq, I want to ask you my last question. If you could make one sustainability wish for business in the new year, what would it be?
That's a good question. I remain wishful, but also I remain it will turn into practical execution, right? I think my ambition or vision for sustainability here, one is actually businesses, tak kisahlah whether you're big, small, corporate, multinational, GLCs, for example. My wish is actually that don't compromise social and environmental stewardship for the long term just because pursuing short-term profit. And we covered this a bit tadi, right? So do I go for revenues, profit earnings, and compromise the obligation lah, orang kata amanah, for example, for the environment, society, right? So I wish that balancing act, and I think a lot of companies now are doing, forecasting, budgeting, planning for 2025 and onwards. Consider this more, right? The long-term investment, when we talk about society and environment, is far more important, I feel. And we're talking about the future generations lah, of Malaysia. So that's something that I feel we can do more of. And I'm hopeful and wishful that we're going to that mindset.
And definitely we're hoping to bring all of this wish and hope to 2025 and a year ahead. And maybe we could recap on what you've just said around our topic here is do not sacrifice short-term profit do not sacrifice the environmental value or obligations or responsibility just for a short-term profit.
Gains,
So maybe that is the end of our discussion here. Again, I want to say thank you very much to Wan Dazriq from Tata Consultancy Services. And again, I want to say have a good holiday and I'll see you next year.
Thank you so much, Nina.
And definitely all of our discussion here will be featured in AstroAwani.com and across all social media platforms.